Okay, everybody, we are going to be moving on a little bit here and spreading our wings and moving over into Asia. And it's been a while since we've been here, so let's get into some things. Well, probably the empire within Asia that made one of the biggest runs in a relatively short amount of time would be the Ottomans. Now, when last we left the Ottomans, they were a group that had actually just come into power in Turkey, and that mainly was because of the Mongols. You see, the Mongols wrecked everybody else so much around them, but never really got out to the Turks so much that the Ottomans were really able to get themselves in a position to kind of seize control of Turkey. And from there, they're slowly but surely going to expand south, get themselves into like the modern day Holy Land, start to get into Egypt. And really, the big thing that's going to help them is because of their centralized location and controlling trade, they're going to score gunpowder. And when they have gunpowder, they make big cannons and then they start to conquer everybody. And the guy that was really the first one to start to make a big run of expansion was their great Sultan Mehmed II, also known as Mehmed the Conqueror. Now, it's interesting that he's called Mehmed the Conqueror not because he necessarily conquered a huge amount of land, but it's what he conquered. And he conquered the Byzantines. As you see a picture on the right there, that is a depiction of the Ottomans finally sacking Byzantium. You see this guy falling here, that's kind of unfortunate. You see this is all like shredded and destroyed. I'll show you why. But they brought an end to the great Byzantine Empire in 1453, which means they're technically Romans, so the Romans are now gone. And let's give a moment of silence if you wish. And let's remember, the Romans were starting really around 600 BCE and went all the way to 1453. Last time I checked, that's 2,000 years. We're only a tenth of the way there in the United States. So when you have this, you can do, see that hole? See that big gaping hole in the walls of Constantinople? Yeah, boom. That thing is gigantic, and it was really what enabled the Ottomans to go on a run. And they would continue to go on a run until they got to their greatest ruler, Suleiman the Magnificent. And Suleiman, I believe, would rule from 1520 to 1564, and he is just going to go on a run. One of the key moments in his career was the Battle of Mohawks, which you see him on the right there on his horse with his cool winged helmet. Getting the Hungarians to bow down to him. He is going to conquer massive areas in Europe. He beats up on the Holy Roman Empire, although they are able to finally get him to stop at the city of Vienna in Austria. It doesn't matter, he'll just conquer all of northern Africa anyway. He also will take out the Venetians, even though Venice will exist into the 1800s. It's in the mid 1500s that they kind of like fall out of being an actual power. And the key thing with him is trade, controlling the trade routes. They will control Indian Ocean trade. They will control absolutely all overland trade in the Middle East. And I mean, as you see here, look at all this. All of North Africa, up into Hungary. All the purple is what Suleiman conquers. Again, 1520 to 1566. It's just absolutely incredible. And in the end, Suleiman would be the greatest emperor of this time. And the peak of the empire is in 1566. And they'll do really well till, like, say, the mid 1600s, but then will be a slow decline after that. And we'll get into that a little bit later. Now, what that made the Ottomans so successful was dealing with foreigners. When you control that much area, you're controlling a lot of people that aren't Turkish. And that is tricky. What do you do with all those foreign born people? So, what they often did was take a lot of the aristocracy and let them hold power. But the most interesting thing they did, and you never really saw another empire do this to this degree, was dealing with them in the military. What the Ottomans did was create something known as the Janissaries. Now, the Janissaries were a group of foreign soldiers that would become the backbone of the empire. What they would traditionally do is take a lot of times Christian children and raise them as Muslims, and then they would do it with other groups as well. Now, these guys would become the soldiers of the Janissaries. Now, They were not allowed to have children, so early on, most of them eunuchs, we talked about that. However, a leader of the Janissaries was considered to be one of the higher end people in the empire. And so, what they would do is that when they would conquer people, they would also allow them to volunteer to be part of this army and continuing to conquer other people. And slowly but surely, the Janissaries became very loyal to actually the Sultan. And so, in the short burst of time under Mehmed and Suleiman, the Janissaries are going to prove to be crucial. Now, moving forward long term, that's going to be a little bit different. Eventually, the Janissaries will realize they're in a position of power and often cause some problems. We'll get to that in the future. Now, another empire right next door to the Ottomans would be the Safavids. Now, the Safavids is a relatively short lived empire. It's really just from about 1499 to the mid 1600s, but they will prove to be the foundation really for the modern day Iran that you know today. Basically, what happens is in the year 1499, a 12-year-old boy by the name of Ismail rises up near the city of Gilan and basically proclaims that he's going to reestablish a great Persian empire. Now, in the end, he's able to raise an army and actually start to conquer what was much of the central part of the Persian Empire, or today what we call modern day Iran, parts of Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, and like Armenia. Now, he takes the title of Shah, which those rulers would for a long time, and what he does to legitimize his rule is he claims that he is the descendant of Safi al-Din, hence Safavid, who was a great Muslim Sufi, an incredible teacher and writer, and also a political leader in the late 1200s and early 1300s. He supposedly died with an out and air, and then this guy pops up out of nowhere and dominates everything. We really don't know kind of how he got his fathering or his following, but he was able to do it. And this is a picture of an adult him taking out one of his rivals. Good sword play there. But the reason why he was able to unite his empire so strongly was the development of a religion that we call Twelver Shi'ism. It's basically a sect of Islam. And the whole idea was that, if you remember, the Shia believed that Ali should have been the rightful heir to Muhammad. And that even after Ali's assassination, that they kind of have a couple twists on the rules, which we talked about in the Islam video. But what the Twelvers believed was that there were 12 infallible imams, that they were also the descendants of Ali, that are the true leaders. You can kind of call these guys like a pope, if you will. That's the kind of power they were expected to have. And that in 894, the last imam went into hiding, but it was proclaimed that he would come back one day. Many people were kind of alluding, thinking that Ismail was this guy. Now, the imam is going to be an important thing. The imam actually will eventually become the ayatollah, who is one of the spiritual and actually great leaders, if you will, that's their title, of Iran today. Now, something that they were to identify themselves as Twelver was the Kizilbash, which, if you look on the right, is that hat with the red point on it. But what you had was a strong centralized empire brought back to Persia because it had really been a while since the Umayyads and those groups as well. Now, the basics of the empires, as you can see, I mean, it was quite large. The orange area was what Ismail was eventually able to take. Now, you see the little lines that are either purple or green. Eventually, a chunk of that land will be lost to the Ottomans or the Khanate of Bukhara or the Khanate of Khiva, Mongols again. And that's one of the reasons why the empire would be relatively short lived. You've just got too many stronger empires on the outside. However, it would have its probably largest area of influence under Shah Abbas the Great. Under him, he was able to have strong military. He was able to expand trade. He actually would able to set up trading agreements with a number of European nations, which the guys before him really had not done. He does control Mesopotamia as well as Iran, and will hold this rule until 1629. Like I said, eventually they're just going to fall apart. Internal struggles, as well as the Mughals, are going to come in and beat them up a little bit later on. But nonetheless, an important empire again, and Islam is holding true. Now we're going away from Arabs, we're back to Persians and Turks, but it sees the power of Islam. Probably the largest empire, though, at this time, and the most powerful independently, would be the Mughals, who were actually Mongols. Yes, the Mongols are back. In 1523, a man by the name of Zahir al-Din Muhammad, better known as Babur the Tiger, which is pretty cool, and that's just a meme because, it's funny. It's a cat. It's a computer. If you can't laugh, I give up on you. Now, he claimed that he was descended from both Genghis Khan and Tamerlane, and there is some evidence that that indeed was the case. Now, initially, he tried to set himself up in an empire in Uzbekistan and Afghanistan, but it didn't work really well. But in 1523, he decides to move down into the Delhi Sultanate and is able to really conquer much of northern India and parts of Pakistan. And Mughal was what they were actually known as because he is not only part Mongol, but he's also Persian, and so the Mughal is the Persian name for Mongol. Now, it was under his grandson Akbar that the empire would just be huge, and you would basically see them seize power over all of modern day India except for the southern tip, as well as all of Pakistan, parts of Afghanistan, a little bit into like Nepal and Tibet and modern day Bangladesh. He takes over in the grandson of Babur will take over in 1561. His name is Akbar. And he seizes power very, very impressively when one of his cousins and main rival, who was an army leader, Adnam Khan, he had him thrown out of a window in the central court of Delhi. So that's how you take control. He had a government very similar to our own. He basically had a series of cabinet positions of guys that were in charge of certain aspects of the government, like transportation and trade. He was very deeply Muslim. However, he started a policy to ease tensions between Muslims and Hindus. We talked about the issues, you had that before, by allowing lots of toleration and allowing people to worship as they will. And what he tried to do was create something called a syncretic religion, that you should have this multi-religious empire that is synchronized between each other. So Muslims do what Muslims want, Hindus do what they want, but they all look to the emperor as the ruler amongst all of them. And he has a period of peace and prosperity. India is on lockdown control of the Indian Ocean trade for now. The Europe's going to kind of take it. But as you see there on the right, that's his tomb, and just incredible levels of success. Of course, most people you guys know of this time period this is when the Taj Mahal was built by the Shah Jahan, and him and his most favored wife. And everything is going swimmingly until 1707. That is when you had the, I believe, great grandson of Akbar, Aurangzeb, take control. Now, he is going to increase the empire to its largest state by 1707, and then basically tear it all apart. He is a diehard Muslim, and he's going to persecute and tax Hindus. He's going to destroy Hindu temples, which will result in the fracturing of the empire, as well as the Civil War. And when all this starts to happen, eventually England is going to kind of come in. So unfortunately, what we also see here is that some of these empires will self-destruct. Now, Aurangzeb is considered to be like this high-end guy. Like, you have a painting of him here facing down an elephant because, you can beat an elephant with a spear. But nonetheless, these empires, what they were called, these gunpowder empires, because they all had access to it and incredibly powerful. So in India, in Persia or Iran, and in the Middle East, they're growing and growing. But the question is, those areas today aren't really known for having big time empires. So what kind of will happen to all of them? Well, you're going to see, and we're going to get into individual, but I want to kind of introduce these problems. What you'll end up happening is a series of bad leaders. For instance, in the Ottoman Empire, you have two leaders here. You have Selim the Sot on the left, who actually never leaves the palace and is known for just having these harems of women. On the right is Ibrahim the Mad, or Ibrahim the Crazy, who basically was definitely had mental illness. And just spends his money on protection and lavishness. He's eventually assassinated. But what also starts to happen is that they, attack ethnic groups. Religion is a major issue because you start to have non Muslims that don't like the Muslims in the empires, and then particularly like in the Safavid Empire and in the Ottoman Empire, the rulers get so lavish and wealthy, much like the medieval popes, that people start to have problems with that and they feel that they're getting away from the message, and that's going to cause a problem as well. You also have economic problems, is that their armies got so big that they couldn't really afford them. They had high taxation. They really didn't um, have lots of creative and business. They weren't doing manufacturing. They really weren't doing what the Europeans will do, which we will get to. And fighting lots of wars also will strain their technology. They'll be lacking in technology as well, because even though their economics would be kind of up and down, they'll miss out on more advanced ships and more advanced weapons. Yes, they have these big cannons, but they won't have as good like rifles and stuff. They'll get lots of political issues. And then you'll start to have some problems in which, again, you get some cultural things that against modernization, which is not going to go as well. And in the end, what all of these empires will eventually face down is, you see this picture here. This is the Sultan Aurangzeb actually meeting a British soldier. And in the end, that's going to be the fall when they end up getting beat up by the Europeans. But nonetheless, it was a dynamic time period. We'll get more into it in class, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.